everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Young, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I am so excited to have David Nui on the phone. He is the founder and CEO of TINYpulse. And if you've seen out there in the universe, I'm pretty tightly aligned with them and their employee engagement platform that they have. And I was really blessed to be able to speak at their most recent TinyCon users conference, and just to be a part of that tribe of people who are looking to improve their culture. And also I work really closely with one of his team members, and he was like, you have got to get David on there. Oh, David's going to be the perfect leader for the show. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I love the organization. So I'm pretty sure David's going to be awesome. So welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Heather. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey? Of course, I introduced it a little bit, but tell us a little bit more.
Sure. I'm afflicted by the entrepreneurial bug. So this is my third startup. Going back is I met my first co-founder during Welcome Week at business school while we were getting our MBA. And we were really foolish, and MBA meant to us management by accident. So that was our first one, and sold that after about 5 years of toiling away, and some of the hardest lessons I've ever learned. Him and I, we started another startup and ran that for about 5 years. And this is my third one, and TINYpulse was started in 2012.
Wow. And that is a lot of entrepreneurship. And I think, were they all similarly, like, was the focus real similar, or was it going in that direction where it led you here?
No, actually, that's a great question. I think what the first one was a B2B software startup. Okay. The second one was a B2C to B play. And I realized that I'm barely smart enough to win one front, either B2B or B2C, much less B2C than B2B. So I vow never to do that again. And, TINYpulse is B2B, and I feel like I'm better suited if I know I can delight someone, they'll pay me, versus I have to delight one audience, get eyeballs, and then sell it to another party who might want to buy those eyeballs to advertise to. So squarely B2B now.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so I'm curious to know how you landed in this place. Like, was there an incident? Did you just like read an article or a book and something made you go, you know what, this is an area that needs to be, filled?
Yeah, sure. So near the tail end of my second startup, I started getting really burnt out at work. And in addition, I had some big life-changing moments. I got married and had a baby daughter in really quick succession. And during our courtship, we decided to invest in our relationship, and we went to a John Gottman course local here in Seattle. And his claim to fame is that he can observe a couple, and then in less than 1 hour predict with like 94% certainty if that couple is going to get divorced or not, based on some certain principles. And so we decided to invest in our relationship. And one part of the exercise was sharing with each other our dreams. And I told Alice, my wife, that one of my dreams in life is to take what I call a career vacation, or a careercation for short. So I didn't want to wait till, like I see it with my parents when they say, oh, we'll travel when we're a little bit older and we have a little bit of wealth, but our health goes down. So I wanted to chop that up. So in the beginning of 2012, we sold everything we owned, stuffed the rest of our belongings in storage, and then we bought one-way tickets to New Zealand with my wife, myself, and then our daughter, Kira, was 10 months old. And so we just decided that we were going to live at our suitcase. We didn't want to live in a hotel. We wanted to live where the locals live, to go to their coffee shop, their farmer's market. And so we traveled around the world for about 6 months. And during that careercation, I also decided that I was going to interview CEOs wherever I went. And in particular, I wanted to interview CEOs who weren't in the tech space like I was in Seattle. I wanted to talk to them about their pain points and also inspiration when it came to leadership, managing people, and culture. Because from my experience as a leader, the hard stuff is the soft stuff when it comes to dealing with people. And so I interviewed over about 35 of them. And at the end of every interview, I'd ask them, one question. I said, well, what's one pain point you have when it comes to managing your people that if I took away, you gladly pay for it? And different leaders would tell me different reasons. But at the end of the day, when I got sufficiently far away from Seattle in both time and distance, could I be really still and kind of sift through those answers to see if there was a theme? And there was. That despite where they were located, despite how big their company was, despite what industry they were in, that regardless, that one of the most haunting feelings for any of these leaders is when a key employee says, Heather, here's my 2 weeks notice out of the blue. And so, everyone could relate to that. And that was just a common theme. So that became the inspiration for TINYpulse, as I do believe that there's a new generation of leaders who really do care about how happy, frustrated, and burnt out their employees are. But instead of doing that dinosaur pulse once a year of 50 questions, want to flip it on its head and drip out lightweight questions because your people change all the time and you want to get ahead of that.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, I think obviously I work in mostly in that big dinosaur space, but wanting to work more in the TINYpulse space, I do believe it's very effective. The more we can listen, the more frequently we can listen, and the more attuned we are to the little message that we're hearing and seeing the trends, I think we're going to have a better chance of changing the culture. So I believe deeply in all of the work that you do in the platform that you have. So that's just awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's the thing. I know that you travel a lot, and I know I know the size of your team. It's not super large, but it's a nice sized team. What do you do? What do you think actually your people think of you as a leader? Like, how they describe you as a leader? Maybe your leadership style.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that they would say that I lean towards being transparent. So I'd be a horrible poker player. Like when I'm happy, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. If I need to be intense, they can feel that as well. So there's pros and cons that come with that transparency. I think that I'm also very supportive. I'll ask them, is there anything I can do to help you out on this situation? I won't ever ask them to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And probably another trait is probably being very analytical. Like if they, give me a statement or assertion, I might say, well, what's the data to back that up? Is that your opinion, or is this based on data? So we can make a better decision.
I like that. It's interesting because, I don't tend to be someone who goes, is this about data? But because I work with so many people like in HR or their analytics or COOs, and they're just folks that tend to be data oriented, I have to go with them a different way.
Yeah.
I can't just go with them with the guts, like like the way I roll is pretty much intuition. So I've learned over time, I think that's just something like a skill growth area, right? That I just had to grow into that and be better in that area. But that's interesting. Okay.
And conversely, I feel the same way sometimes that if I jump into the data too soon and I don't focus on some of the soft skills, EQ, team building part, that it doesn't work out well. So I'm on the opposite side of the equation. I know that I have a ton to learn on marrying more EQ into the kind of the more hard edges of analytics.
That's interesting. Well, you know what? It takes all types. I always tell people, it's like, I love the folks that are more analytical and data driven because I can lean on them quite a bit in the work I do with because they help me with different things with clients. So, I love that. So here's another thing. So when you think about most of us, when we desire to lead others, so you obviously the third startup, you want to go with something great. You want to create things. You want to produce great results. Where does that drive to kind of lead ideas and people come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from the, so yes, but one on the ideas and two on the people side. I think on the idea side is I get driven if I benefit from continual learning and a thirst for learning. And I believe that being in software, specifically SaaS or software as a service, a subscription business, is super new. I mean, you think about Salesforce has been around for about 20 years, and they are the grandfather or granddaddy of the whole kind of software as a service boom. So it's super new, and people share all the time about metrics, about their pain points, their challenges and opportunities. And I get to be a part of those conversations. And for example, every year we go to a conference called SaaStr Annual in the Bay Area. We consider that our Super Bowl. So myself and 6 to 7 other TINYpulsers will fly down to the Bay Area, and we'll soak up content it's a 3-day conference, but instead of just flying back at the end of day 3, I usually make that mistake. We stay there for another day, that 4th day, where we just talk about what are the 2 things we're going to take away and implement in the business that are going to be different based upon what we learn, instead of just rushing back to the urgent at the expense of the important. So I believe that I'm really fortunate to be in an industry that's changing so much and has so much learning and sharing. And so that really drives me on the ideation side. And then on the people side, I get really passionate when I ask people in every interview question, I say, what are some of your short-term and long-term goals? So Heather, if we were to meet again in 5 years being short-term and 10 years being long-term, although some millennials, their brains may blow up when I say 10 years, but I'll ask them, if we were to meet up, what will you be proud that you've accomplished? Because if I don't know what you'd be proud that you accomplished, I can't help you as a manager, if we were to work together, get to that goal faster. And we all want to make other people's goals come true. So, I think that, that's one area when I see, and I understand that, and I see a tremendous growth in the people. Like there's someone on our marketing team who's just grown a tremendous amount. Took a leap of faith, bringing him on board, and then just seeing his growth on all aspects, and seeing him be able to knock it out of the park, definitely gives me a lot of warm and fuzzies, and it makes me very proud of where he's come, and more so, where he's going to be going in the future.
I love that. So kind of your own personal growth, and then seeing the growth of those around you, the fact that you maybe produced fertile soil for them to grow on is something that really motivates you, it sounds like.
Yes, definitely.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think I wish there were just more leaders that had that mindset. I mean, I know, again, you're moving around. So for you have to have a high level of trust in the people that you hire. So I know your hiring process is probably not a quick one, because you need to make sure that you trust them, given the fact that things are moving so quickly as a fairly new company. Right. And so I think that's, I just wish more leaders were like that, because I noticed that when I'm looking at all the survey comments that I reviewed over time, the different organizations, that idea of feeling like you're reaching your potential, you're part of something meaningful, you're reaching your potential, you're doing your best work. It really is, right, one of the key things that drives people to want to stay or go from an organization. So I think you having that focus is good. It's very awesome. Okay, so when we think now about, we can hear that you're enlightened. We hear about your journey. We know that you're, evolving and that you're learning, and we all are trying to get better. But there are those times sometimes when we just are not the best versions of ourselves. We aren't maybe that shining example of a leader we'd want to be. Can you think of a specific instance, an example? Because the more specific you are, the actually more helpful it is to those who are listening. A time when you weren't the best version of yourself, and when it comes to leadership, and what it is you did to move past that point and get to the place you are now, where again you're still evolving, but you're just more enlightened at this point.
We at our office, there's on our floor plan, there's one part of it which has like the best sunlight, best views. And, we purposely make that the communal shared area. So not one person has it. And you've been to our office and that, we're in a little bit darker area where everyone sits, and, no one has an office. And, so there's definitely pros and cons to having an open floor plan. And I remember when I was preparing for, I think it was a board presentation, and, I hadn't worked with this person in a while, because I don't know, either I was traveling or someone was out ill. And so we were able to get together in this open, and I just said, let's just meet at my desk. And I literally sit in the middle of everyone, and we were going over numbers or some data points. And I remember, it just not kind of adding up mentally in my mind. So we're going back and forth kind of in that, in the open area. And then, I didn't think anything of it because I felt like, okay, well, I got to jump to the next fire, especially in light of the board meeting.
Yep.
And then later on, this person pulled me aside and just said, David, we can agree to disagree, but next time I would appreciate if we did it in private, because I felt like, our voices got raised and that it didn't reflect well on me.
Oh.
And then, that's not the type of leader that I want to, work with. And, I want to make sure that, we can go to a private room and have those discussions versus out in the open. And that's the first time anyone's ever shared that with me. And I really appreciated that candor, because they could have just sat on that and it could have just festered.
Yes.
So, first thing I said, hey, I didn't realize that. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. So I wanted to acknowledge, their version of, how they saw the truth. I had my version, but, everyone else has their version as well. And I said, if it made you feel that way, that was not my intent. But I can see how that may have made you feel that way. And, my commitment is that next time, we will do this in private. And or just not out in the open. So I thought it was a super well handled request, extremely professional, but also just telling me how it was. Yeah. And I remember thinking about, what could I do to get better at this? And then after that, I used to do meditation. I got away from it, and I feel like that when I meditate, I get to slow things down in my mind a little bit better than when I'm, out in the open field and being energized or stressed out by a board meeting. So I think as a consequence to that, I haven't done that since. And I said, if this ever happens again, feel free, like we're both in it together, is to say, hey, let's grab a room. And I'm not going to get offended. And I will try to temper myself down and maybe try to preempt that by getting a room. And then two, I just made my own commitment to myself is that I was going to get back into meditating to slow things down. And especially given stressful situations.
Mm-hmm. And your job already is, the role that you're in is already a very fast moving, stressful situation. So that's good. I've noticed, I attempt to do that here and there. I went to a conference last year, and I think the same person may be going this year. It's a real small conference called No Longer Virtual. And the person that came was doing some meditation, and I really had not been very successful with it because I am kind of a high strung, hyper type person, but she was so good. I could not believe how relaxed I got. I mean, I was like, this is amazing. I'm like, you need to bottle this up because I'm buying it all day.
Yeah.
Right? She was just so good. And so I've tried like apps and things like that. So I can see how that might help with the slowdown. And one of the things that you said was just super interesting was we all have our own versions of the truth. And so I had mine and they had their version. What I appreciate about like TINYpulse, what you do as a leader and, TINYpulse is when we think about voice of the employee, it is about helping them find their truth and delivering that truth in a way that makes sense to the leaders of the organizations who actually have the power to change something so that truth can, come out in the open. And also maybe the truth can be changed to a more positive light. So I love that idea of, this is my version, but I want to make sure I hear their version. And like, there's some validity behind it. It's just the way you said that. It was like, wow, I love that. Most organizations don't, it's like, no, you may see it that way, but that's not the truth, or that's not the reality. No, that's my version of the reality. And
I think it's also just as fair to say, well, I have a version of the chain of events or my interpretation, and to be very upfront and share back as well, because, if I am not judging, then I hope I don't get judged. But, this is just how I interpret it. And let's have a good conversation based upon that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, again, having more people think that way. I mean, this is why you're on here, right? That leader with heart is definitely somebody who's going to try to use empathy, which, by the way, you did that beautifully when you described how you came back at them and you were talking to them and saying, I see how you can see it that way. I can see how you would perceive that way. Just a perfect way to show empathy for someone. And most people don't really know that. I mean, they may try it as this is a kind of a cool little thing to do, but to really feel for someone and be like, oh my gosh, I made them feel awful. And now I need to go make that right as the leader.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. All right. So knowing, again, kind of going back to this idea of you being busy, a busy entrepreneur who's traveling, you're traveling globally, Vietnam and other places. And so what do you do when you get back, and it's been a while since you get back, what do you do to reconnect with the team so that they know like whatever you've been doing since you've been gone and what they've been doing while you've been gone is like connects to that main purpose of what TINYpulse is all about?
Yeah, so this definitely isn't easy, and hopefully some of your listeners will have great tips for me as well, because I'm all open ears on this since I just got back from Vietnam and Australia. And some of the things that I do, one is we have this program called Tiny Coffee. So I just schedule 30-minute coffees with people. I mean, everyone wants, especially in Seattle, it's getting cold, everyone wants a hot cup of Java in the morning. So I just literally find random people and I'll just schedule coffees with them. We'll usually open my Starbucks app, we'll order it, and by the time we get there, it's waiting for us. And I'll just, I don't have any preset agenda when I'm talking to them. Just want to understand how they're doing. Is there anything I should know about that I don't know about, and just keep it pretty free fluid. But just a great way, especially with new folks, to understand where they are. And then, but the flip side is just for them to understand that I'm accessible, that even though I'm traveling or my title is different, doesn't mean that I'm any less accessible to them. And then, another thing that I like to do, and, this is, anyone could do this with email or in person, but, in our own TINYpulse software, we're able to give what we call cheers for peers, which is just recognition to each other. And one of the things I like to do is in the morning, when my brain is a little bit more quiet, is I want to give away 3 cheers to people for substantive stuff that they've done that, from the prior day where maybe I was too busy to write it down, but I give it to them in the morning so that I start my day with positive wiring, gratitude, and hopefully when they get it, it's something that they appreciate as well. So, those are some of the small hacks that I like to do, which are, getting coffee with people, which seems pretty insignificant, and also sending cheers and recognition to them. A couple other things that I've been doing is, one, every month I send my CEO notes or my thoughts on the prior month. So I'll have each of the functional heads share with me their thoughts about highlights and data points, and then I will take all theirs and distill it into what I think are the 3 most germane, and then share it back with the team. So that's been something I think that most people read and they look forward to it. And then more on a day-to-day basis, we borrowed this from one of our advisors, and we have a CEO Slack channel called New Thoughts. And then so I can just put in thoughts about anything that comes up. Sometimes I'll talk about my Tabata workout routine. Sometimes I'll talk about, one that I've been thinking about putting in there is, what is the amount of prep that goes into a board meeting, and why do we put so much time into a board meeting? But, those are things that if people are more removed from the business or newer and they've never experienced it, I hope that they get a glimpse into it, and it further humanizes me and makes me more accessible.
That's great. That's a great idea. I think for no matter really what size, to somehow just get out there and free flow. Is that edited in any way, or is that literally just kind of your thoughts?
No, those are just literally my thoughts.
Awesome.
So, for example, one of the larger kind of enterprise players in our field, Glint, was acquired by Microsoft in our backyard. So I'm sure that people would probably have questions about it. And so they just asked me, so I just preempted it. It's like, oh, here are my thoughts about it. And I shared it that proactively with people about, how do I view it? What do I think the implications are, if any?
Wow, that's great. I think it's good that you do that. I've always tried to press that with, no matter how large the company is, I pretty much always tell them anything that we do, we want to make sure it's coming from the CEO, and we want to try to make sure that we humanize and bring this person who could be part of a 20,000 person organization, 2,500 person organization, 25 person organization, no matter what, having that connection with that, the senior leaders, that the chief guy or gal that's in charge, I think is key to do
Yeah.
that. So that's good. And I think the people that are listening are probably going to get some value in thinking that through too. Again, no matter how big you are or how small you are, being able to keep that connectedness there. It's key, right? It's in that connection. It's that those connections. We feel like we're family, that team is there. Everything's just right in place when we have that connection. So and I like the way your work environment is too, because you have it very communal feeling. There's like, it feels like there's living rooms and dining rooms and open spaces, and you have places where they can be private. But I like that idea of that it's like a communal space, and it promotes that family and that connectedness.
And, Heather, one of the things I see, based upon our research, that the companies that rate their employees rate themselves the happiest are also the ones that they rate the perception of how transparent they think management is. So that's becoming more and more important is, well, how open and transparent do they think that management is? And I remember, we had some new employees who just onboarded, and we just had our town hall last week. And I heard the whispers like, wow, that's much more transparent than I heard from my other company when they said that everything was going well. And then they had to lay people off. And so, I know that there's always many truths to a story, but I also want to make sure that to the extent possible that we're as transparent as possible and pushing that envelope.
Yes, I think that's good. Because I think number one, they're going to go to bat for you when they know you're being transparent, because their trust is going to be heightened. And so to that extent, they're going to do, if you call them and you need them to do something because something's going a great direction or not so great direction on a prospect or a client, then they're going to move at a more rapid speed and have a sense of urgency because you built that trust with them up front. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. So for those who are listening, who, and leaders that are on here that could be struggling in their leadership, maybe questioning, just their role or questioning their effectiveness, what pearl of wisdom do you think you might want to leave them with today?
Well, I think there's two things that pop to my mind. One is doing just a very comprehensive 360 evaluation. I know it's getting to that end of the year when people do this. And I know that it's always very important for me that my board member does it for me and that I do that for everyone else. It takes a tremendous amount of time and coordination. But I think that, if I'm not willing to put that time into my most important competitive advantage, my people, then, everything else falls apart. And I think, done 360 definitely opens my eyes in terms of my blind spots and, where I can improve as a leader. It also highlights things that I'm doing well that I should not lose sight of and continue to double down in. So I think that external facing is very important. And, internal facing, I think when people are getting lost and, when I feel like I'm floating, is I like to journal and think about, there's a lot of great journals out there about, what are the things I'm grateful for in the morning? What are the things I want to tackle today? And everyone can come up with their own. But I think just the art of slowing down to speed up and not typing an email. I feel like writing, I don't know, the synapses or something in our brain just fire in a different way than like typing notes is when I'm writing the notes. And because it's just a certain different speed in terms of how the brain can process that. So I think by doing that, especially in the morning, is really important to me. And it also, if possible, to do some self-care and, exercise and, take care of the mind and the body, because I do think that's often overlooked where we have these warrior hero leaders about, how many hours they're putting in, blah, blah, blah. But I do feel if we can't take care of ourselves, how can we, take care of others in an effective manner?
It's so true. Sometimes I feel like I'm burning definitely the candle on both ends. And I'm going, right now I am so stressed. Who has any time to like work out or whatever it is, right? And it's like, but I need to do that exact thing. Like I know that's the exact thing that I have to do, no matter how much at that moment I don't want to. Then when I'm done, I always feel good, right? So trying to like pick back up with meditation, and I'm kind of just getting a cadence for it. I think all of those things are good. I love that idea of, slowing down to speed up, giving ourselves that time. I'm hoping those that are listening, this thought resonates with, because I think it's super important and many of us don't do that very well. I appreciate that as that nugget as well. Okay. So if anybody who wants to follow up with you might want to just reach out, what might be the one way they can do that?
Yeah. So I think there's you can find me on Twitter at David Nui, or if you want to, my email address is david@tinypulse.com.
Oh, that's easy. And I'll make sure that that's in the show notes too for anybody who's listening. And listen, if you really enjoyed this episode, please do rate it on iTunes or wherever you listen. There's on about 25 platforms worldwide. And then rate it. Write a review for it. So give us your thoughts, because I like to engage with that. But at the same time, I think the person who does a lot of my editing says that the numbers are going up. People are really listening. I think that it's resonating, hearing these stories from real leaders who are not perfect. They tend to be more emotionally intelligent, but they're not perfect. And so the fact that they're just being awesome enough to share some of the stories where their imperfection might show and some of the ways that they were able to get out of it really is helpful to those listening. So I appreciate everybody joining. And David, thank you so much for all the sharing. It's been awesome.
No, it's my pleasure. It's been a great journey to get to know you better. And, I hope that, your audience gets some takeaway from it. And it was a pleasure to be on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.